Good morning, everybody. Welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast with me, James Dickson, wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you join today's podcast from. This is my first time back behind the microphone of the podcast and recording some episodes today since Event Tech Live Las Vegas. It seems like an absolute age ago that show took place, and it seems even longer since I was behind the microphone for the podcast. So it's great to be back today, and a little shout out at the start of today's recording to anybody listening to this who joined us over at Event Tech Live in Las Vegas for our inaugural event. A fantastic time, a successful event, and looking forward already to being back there for the show next year. But on with today's podcast and on with today's subject matter, talking about something today that has been I would say a consistent topic on the podcast for at least 18 months now. I would say that, you know, certainly every sort of 3 or 4 episodes either touches on this or dives into it in a bit of a deeper conversation, and that is, of course, sustainability. It's grown as a subject matter within the events industry over the last few years. We were talking about a lot on the podcast pre-pandemic. It kind of, I suppose, slipped off the radar for a period of time, understandably, as events suffered during that period between 2020 and 21. But it's been great to see that as live events have very, very much not just come back, but are stronger than ever, that the topic of sustainability has also come back to the forefront of the conversation within the industry. And that's what we're going to be talking about today on the podcast. Events as a force for good, holistic sustainability in the events industry. A white paper that was published this year, and two of the people behind that white paper are joining me on the podcast today to have a little chat about that. I'm delighted to welcome, first of all, Emily Maule, the content and event strategist for emc3. Emily, welcome to the podcast this morning.
Hi there. Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
No problem at all. Delighted that you are here. And joining us as well is Saskya Liney, the founder of From Now, a specialist sustainability consultancy for the events industry. Saskya, a very warm welcome to the Event Industry News podcast.
Thank you. Lovely to be here this morning.
There's a number of places that we could start today. Let's do some introductions first of all, and then maybe dive into the white paper, because that probably gives us as good a starting point as any. Emily, let's come to you first of all. As I said, content and event strategist at emc3. Tell us a little bit about yourself and exactly what emc3 do within the industry.
Hi, yeah, so I'm a content and event strategist with emc3. emc3 is a full service agency, and we help with all sorts of incredible clients to do amazing, really groundbreaking events all through the different spaces. And so, yeah, they do really exciting events. We've just been working on VCon, so that's just been finishing up. And so a really great, successful event there. And in terms of my role, I support with strategy with lots of our different clients to really make sure we're focusing on how we want to achieve our goals, making sure that we have got a really solid purpose-driven strategy so that we can make sure that we are backwards planning so that we can really address those KPIs and achieve the goals that we have set out to do. So that's the main sort of bulk of my role.
Fantastic. And Saskya, tell us a little bit about From Now and why it was set up.
Yes, so I have a background in events, also at emc3, been working in events for kind of the last 10 years. And a few years ago, we kind of had a look at the industry and thought, you know, there's probably a better way of doing this. We should be doing things in a way that isn't so wasteful or isn't so destructive. Obviously, COVID came and changed everybody's event strategies a little bit, but we kind of used that time to put together From Now, which has been doing really well. We are, as you said, a sustainability consultancy focused in the events industry, but also kind of hospitality and leisure industry as well, working with a number of different venues, different corporates, different clients to help make their events and their strategy more sustainable, so that when they're actually wanting to implement sustainability within their events and within their processes, they've got a handle where to start, and they kind of know what needs to be done, because it can feel like such a minefield. Where do we begin? Where do we start with things? So just helping people along that journey From Now.
And let me, I know I said I'd come to the white paper, but straight away, something that springs to mind, Saskya, that I'd like to ask is that subject of understanding, and it can feel like a bit of a minefield, is part of the role of the consultancy, and why From Now exists, is to maybe take some of that sort of real legwork of research off of organisers, because time is so precious to them as an event organiser. are you at a stage at the moment where you won't necessarily know absolutely everything about sustainability, but you can take some of that sort of critical time consuming work off of the organizers' hands and do the research on their behalf?
Yeah, we absolutely can. I think one of the things that I find most important is actually understanding the organization, whether that's an event as an organization or a business, and working out what your goal is. So quite a lot of people kind of look at sustainability and they're like, all right, well, we're going to do tote bags, or we're going to get rid of plastic, or we're going to do this. But actually taking a step back and working out, okay, how can we have the biggest impact? Quite often it's attendee travel, which isn't like one of the jazzy things that you want to shout about, but attendee travel is one of the places where often you make the biggest carbon saving. So it's having a look there at what you want to achieve and making sure that it's relevant to your company. There's no point picking a goal that's not kind of relevant to everybody working on the event or everybody involved in the event. And then, as you said, there's a lot of legwork in measuring or reducing or researching how you're going to get there. So we kind of help all along the journey. I think the most important part is that goal setting, and working out what do we want to achieve, and also the why. Why do we want to achieve it? Everybody knows kind of, oh, we'll do sustainability, it's good for the environment. But actually, there's a lot more to it, working out why we want to achieve this goal for this event. And it might be different for other events or different companies. So just working out the why as well there.
I'll just jump in on that with
please,
the
Emily, yeah.
The workshops that From Now do are really powerful with really helping people think through, well, what is it that we want to achieve? And so what would be an appropriate set of goals for us to all really align on, get behind on, make sure that we have got a real united front on working to achieve that goal. Because if you've got the whole team united, you are so much more likely to be able to achieve that goal. And Saskya and the consultants that work with her, the workshops that they do are really good at driving into what is it that's going to be appropriate for your team, your organization, your audience, your clients, so that it can be something that's really purposeful and meaningful and is much more likely to then be successful. So that, yeah, the workshops they do with that are really powerful.
I'm going to come to the white paper now, but I have got to, don't let me forget, there's a question I'd like to ask about buy-in on this, which we'll come to in a bit. But let's move to the white paper. This is available, Emily, via the emc3 website, and the white paper, if somebody, we'll put a link into it, but if you search sustainable events white paper and emc3.com, yeah, it will be really easy to find anybody listening to this today. So do go and have a look at it, and it may be useful if you're listening to this podcast now, to pause and maybe get that white paper in front of you, because it's a point of reference that people could have while they're listening to this. Tell us a little bit about the thinking and the process behind putting it together, and maybe, you know, some of what was the process in developing this, because it's fairly comprehensive.
Yeah, thank you. So the white paper came about, we were wanting to explore a little more about how events could be used as a force for good. So not just about limiting negative impact, but also thinking about how can we be using events to leave places, leave people, leave communities better off than they were before the event, as opposed to thinking, how can we just use this space, use this team, how can we be leaving these people, these places, these communities better off than they were before? And that's obviously a lot of what From Now is focusing on. How can we be making sure that our events are sustainable, and not just about reducing carbon impact, but also thinking about how can we make sure that these events are economically sustainable, are socially sustainable? Are they going to be of benefit to the community where they are taking place? And so we wanted to explore this a little bit further. My background, I'm a geographer. And so this is a very familiar topic to me, very comfortable topic for me in terms of my academic background. I also taught geography for a really long time. And so this is something that was really significant to me. But I also really was looking for some more event-specific data and information, as my academic background means that I really want to see the data. I want to see the results. I want to see the graphs, the evidence. I want to know where you got that graph from. I want to know that that data is valid. And so this was something that we wanted to contribute to all of the great work that is already being done across the industry, but to add something else to contribute, to drive it forwards. And so we wanted to look at a number of different things. starting off with a bit of an overview of why this is significant. What is the state climatically that we're at the moment? What are some of the risks that we are facing? What are some of the timeframes involved? How do we gather that data? So hopefully people will find that really interesting, and how we gather some of that climate data. I always love that section. And then it's really just cool to see an ice core, like, and how they track all of that different sort of atmospheric data. So that's pretty cool.
Well, absolutely. One, if you don't mind me jumping in here, just there's something that jumps out in the first sentence of it's the first, I suppose, full explanatory tab. What is the problem in the white paper? And in the first sentence it says the event industry's continued reliance on natural and human resources. And what I really liked in that opening sentence is reliance on natural and human resources. Excuse me, because I've said this before on the podcast, that there is this, I suppose, thinking amongst a lot of people in the events industry that when it comes to sustainability, it's all about climate change. It's all about carbon footprint. It's all about using recycled coffee cups and not having any, single-use plastic on site, etc., etc. But this whole element of well-being, of human resources, of the sustainability aspect of looking after your teams in the industry so that they stay within your employment for longer. So I was really, really interested to see that the word human resource was used in the very first sentence.
And that's why it's about this holistic sustainability, because we're not just thinking about how can we reduce our single-use plastic, but exactly how can we make sure that the people that are working in our industries are taken care of, and that they are invested in, and that they are earning a fair wage, and that they have all of the different elements that will allow them to be successful in their employment, in their career, and that it's an industry that our next generation of young people are really excited to join, because they know that there is a great future there, that there is job protection there, and all of those different elements. So that's definitely a really important tenet of this. And we wanted to look at some of the, obviously, as you'd said, this is such a big area. It's grown so much in terms of its visibility in the industry, in the community. But one thing we touch on, for example, is this concept of greenwashing, and how people can be very quick to use certain terms that actually we don't know what they mean. What does it mean if something's greener, or if something has recyclable material in it? That could be the tiniest fraction that actually isn't very significant. And Saskia, you've got a great example with the cotton tote bags, the example of how actually, to get the most out of an organic cotton tote bag, you have to use it so many times. I
think it's like you'd have to use it every day for something like 50 to 70 years to make it
wow.
kind of more sustainable than using plastic bags, just because of the amount of water that it takes to grow the cotton and the amount of production that goes into that. So we have quite a lot of people who just think, okay, well, we're not going to have a plastic bag at the event, we're going to give everyone a tote bag. Everybody has 150 tote bags sitting under their sink in a bag. We don't use them all every day, so we don't need to be producing those things. And that's kind of where we have a look again at all of the different goals. And using that tote bag example, it might be that we don't spend £5 on giving everybody a tote bag because nobody needs one. We send them an email and ask them to bring their own. We look at investing that £5 in planting 5 trees, or we look at making a donation to a local charity, or using it to get tickets for local students to come along to the event, or we give everybody a Duolingo subscription for a month, or a Headspace subscription for a month, and give them actually a giveaway or a swag item, as it's known, that actually does some good either to them or the local community, rather than just thinking a tote bag is sustainable, a reusable coffee cup is sustainable. We need to think a little bit more about the wider impact and actually dig into it and think about, okay, how can we make the best use of this investment we have for the event, and not just in a marketing term and ROI, actually investing in local communities, investing in those destinations. When you've got a 5,000 person event and you're choosing a destination, it's worth thinking about, okay, where can we actually have a positive impact on a destination? We can use some of our funds in maybe a location that we wouldn't have thought of before, and we can engage in some community activities, or we can engage in some kind of biodiversity or regenerative activities whilst we're there, or invest in them and actually use it as an opportunity to do a bit of good and the legacy of your event. to make it better, rather than just kind of going to a destination, pillaging the resources, using all the cheap labor that might be there, and then leaving. We want to make sure that people are thinking, okay, how can we leave this place a little bit better than it was before we all arrived?
On the subject, I don't want to dwell on tote bags for the entire
It's what everyone talks about when they think of sustainability.
But
isn't it?
Just thinking about it, are you trying to promote, or will you ask your clients why do they want them in the first place? What are we putting in these bags now at events? Because there's people travel light. People are used to traveling light nowadays. They can get their entire business in a laptop and a mobile phone and put it in a backpack and hop on a train somewhere. Why are we still at a stage where we're giving people tote bags full of information or goodies or whatever?
And there's so much less print at conferences now as well. I was at a conference recently, and it's great to see there is so much less paper that you're being handed, which often just ends up being put in the bin or being recycled. So yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it?
Well, if I could just throw out an example, this is something that's really fresh in my mind because it happened last week. I was working up in Scotland at a university there on a conference for arborists, people who work with trees.
Yeah.
And they had bags given to every delegate that were rammed full of printed information from all of the sponsors and exhibitors. And I thought, is the irony sort of not lost on them a little bit, that they're all people who work in work, trying to promote tree sustainability, and they're handing out literally tons and tons of printed information that was delivered in cardboard boxes via trucks.
And I think, and this is something that From Now is really good at, like Saskya said earlier, about just having that initial conversation of what are your goals here? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to communicate? Maybe there are different ways that we can communicate this. Maybe we can share with you some of our insights of what people are looking for in terms of material swag, because we have lots of information on that. How can we then share that with you so that you can really get to know your people better, and then give them something, like Saskya said, that they are going to value much more than just another tote that's full of printed material that they probably won't read. And it's about that conversations, like, what are you looking for? What are your goals? Then we can help you to put that into a framework so that you can be achieving those goals in a really sort of structured format. And sometimes it really is just about an opportunity to think outside the box, because people often do things because we've always done it this way. And you need the space to be able to think, oh, you could do something different. We could give people a subscription to something for a month, or a voucher for something. Who doesn't love a voucher for free coffee? That kind of thing. That people, sometimes you just have to have that conversation, and then they can go, oh, that's a great idea. My people would love that. But it's just because they get so stuck in a rut, and you're so busy and there's so much going on and you don't have the headspace, that you get sort of into this pattern of just, well, it's what we did last year, let's just do it again because it's easy, instead of something that could be a quick, simple change that would be just so much more impactful.
Yeah.
And quite often you'll get the response, oh, well, it's sponsors need to have their logo on things, or sponsors need to have a piece of paper that's got their information on it because they're paying for a service. But actually, when you dig into it, the sponsors are thinking the same thing. I mean, we've built sponsorship prospectuses that are based around sustainability. So a sponsor will sponsor the recycling of the event. A sponsor will sponsor a donation to a local food bank. A sponsor has a million different things they can sponsor at an event. It doesn't have to be a piece of paper or a tote bag. And actually, they are things that are more meaningful. If you go to a yoga class in the morning of your event and it's sponsored by XYZ, you're going to remember that person because they sponsored the yoga class and it was run by them and they organized it, probably more than if somebody hands you a pencil with that person's logo on, or a flyer with that person's logo on. So the exposure can still be there without having to produce things.
Well, we have so many digital assets now at events, not just on site, but in the run up as well. You might have a virtual events platform that you're using. There are loads of tech providers out there that provide event platforms. They can be sponsored, event apps, registration platforms, you know, and then when we get on site, you know, TVs are 10 a penny now on show floors, at trade shows, at conferences. We've got big screens everywhere. You know, there are so many sort of even in hotel venues now, it's not uncommon for them to have TVs mounted next to the doors of their conference rooms, you know, that you can put content on. You know, if people actually took a minute to look at how many digital assets they've got available to them, or that they could deploy at an event, I think you'd get just as much, if not more, brand coverage for sponsors as if you would just giving it somebody on a piece of paper. Because to me, the piece of paper, as well, as a very short life cycle. You know, often it goes in the boot of the car if they've driven there, or it goes in a tote bag, they get on the train, or they go home and it gets left by the front door, never to be seen again. So I think just utilizing digital assets, I think, is one of the sort of the biggest messages you can put to any level of event organizer, whether it's a 50.
Yeah, sorry. And I was just going to say, and ultimately, it's often also what the community associated with that sponsor are looking for as well. The community that sponsor already has is also looking for their sponsor, for their company, their organization that they're affiliated with, to be setting new standards and doing things differently. And the data that we have and the sort of organizations that we've been in contact with are saying similar things. Everybody's looking for the companies and organizations that they're affiliated with to be setting new standards. And that was something that we really wanted to highlight with this white paper, and with some of the examples that we included, and some of that sort of best practice piece, because there is incredible work going on, and we really wanted to celebrate that and to give it a bit of a spotlight. But there is also a lot of work still to do. And so that was, I think, the sort of the balance we tried to strike with this.
I think using the digital assets as an example there, we had a client who actually said, okay, we'll do this, but now we're really worried about the amount of electricity that we're using because we've got all these extra screens. So you can't be perfect in every single way. It's about choosing what you want to achieve. And part of their goals were having a paperless event and not having any print. And so the digital assets did tick that box, that we're not going to print, we're going to go digital. Yes, there is obviously a carbon footprint from using the screens and from using that electricity, even if it's renewable. You know, the screens have got to be produced or transported. But it's, as Emily said, it's about celebrating what you have done and celebrating that we have made this choice and this is our journey. And there's always going to be people, you know, we work in sustainability. Emily and I both have cars that we drive. We're not, you know, the people who are just walking everywhere, because sometimes we need to go in the car. And so nobody's perfect. We need to just work on, you know, we're on our journey and we're trying, and being able to talk about that and being able to publish that is really, really important. There's a section in the white paper that talks about green hushing, and that is just saying nothing because you're too scared that people are going to pull you up on it or say you're not doing good enough or you should be doing better. And actually not talking about sustainability and kind of hiding anything you are doing is sometimes as damaging as greenwashing, just because, you know, quite often all we see are people who are doing things really, really well. So you'll see like, oh great, we had a net zero event and we had no waste to landfill and we did all this great community stuff. That's not realistic or achievable for everybody. So it's really important that we talk about the fact that, oh yeah, we got rid of print. We know there's a carbon footprint associated. We're measuring it for the digital print, but we're doing what we can. You know, don't be afraid to actually make those small steps. Just because you're not perfect and just because, you know, you're not doing everything that could possibly be done doesn't mean that we shouldn't be celebrating those little journeys that people are taking.
And I wonder
go on, Emily, jump in.
What you were going to mention earlier, maybe about the buy-in piece. I think that the key thing here is about how you get everyone on board. Okay, and it can be tricky to get people on board. You know, it can be tricky to change the way people have done things, and that can be tricky. But again, one of the things that we often look at in the workshops is, what is the first little thing that you can do? A little change, just a little change. It might not even be removing all printed material. We worked relatively recently with a client, and it was just about reducing the printed material, just introduction, or about just a little menu change. For example, one of our consultants was working with a client, and they proposed a beef-free menu. The client was super happy with it. There was great feedback about the menu from all the delegates. The fact that there wasn't a beef dish was not even noticed. But again, it made a huge difference, not only to the cost of the menu for the client, but to the overall carbon impact of the event. And so sometimes it really is just about those little changes, just to get the ball going, get some data, that baseline data, just a little step, and then next time maybe do a little bit more, and so that it can gradually build up, so that it can be something that is achievable, that is sustainable, that you can really get buy-in from, that you can then, once you've got some data, you can then present that data to leadership and say, look, this is the impact that it had. This is great. Our customer base, our community base is going to think that this is a really strong move. This was the feedback on the event. This was the feedback on X, Y, and Z. So it's, it is a really positive thing. And I am a real advocate for just getting that data. And, even if the data isn't perfect, if you can get something, then you've got your benchmark, and then you can start comparing year on year, event on event. And it's just a way of then showing the impact of what you're doing. And like Saskya said, even if it's little, showing what you're doing.
And I guess what I want to ask here, Saskya, is what it's like working with clients who themselves are organising events now. It is one of the, I suppose, the panic considerations from them, that they feel like overnight or in 1 year, from event to event, they've got to change everything and suddenly make it a sustainable event. Is this something that actually we can use to our advantage to sort of just reassure organisers a little bit that actually nobody's going to think ill of you if you don't change overnight? It's about showing this progress that Emily was talking about.
Yeah, and people do worry, because I think if you don't know much about sustainability, or if you don't have a huge experience in it, you kind of look at your event and you think, where do we start? We've got companies we're working with, and they're like, we just don't know where to start. We can see everywhere that there are these negative things happening. Where do we start? And it's that there's so much to do, but I'm going to do nothing because there's so much to do that I can't take it on. It's too big a project. We'll think about that next year. And that's quite often what we see is, okay, well, we're really busy. The event's in 6 weeks. We'll think about it next time. Mm-hmm. And that cycle continues, and then those changes don't get put in. So what we do in the workshops is break it down into the goals. And we've talked about this a little bit, but the goals being like, okay, well, this year there's less print. Next year, all the print's made of recycled paper. Year 3, we're a printless event. Something like that gives us, okay, we've got 3 years to go from basic to better to best, and we'll try and get there. And if we don't get there, we'll realign our goals after 1 year and see how we're tracking, or see how we've measured. People are worried about the amount of things that they have to do. But as we've said, doing something little is better than doing nothing. And you'll be surprised at how much value consumers are putting on sustainability at the moment. If you can show that, oh, great, we're having a vegetarian lunch today because it's saving this much carbon, which is equivalent to driving to Edinburgh this many times, or whatever that calculation looks like, and you can show your attendees this is why we're doing it, you're going to have buy-in. And I think in the events industry, we've got a really rare opportunity in that when we've got delegates at a conference, especially, you control where they travel to, because you control the destination, you control what they eat, what they drink, you control what type of electricity they use to some extent through choosing a venue that perhaps uses renewables, you control the content they consume, you control everything that kind of they consume within that event period, whether that's a day or a week. And you can use that opportunity to really showcase that life can be more sustainable. So showcasing that, we're having a plant-based lunch and it's delicious. You could do this at home,
we did that recently, didn't we, Saskya? At the Reimagine event that we hosted an event with From Now at BMA House at the end of March, and which was brilliant. It was all on just this exact topic, events as a force for good. We had some brilliant partners with us, and the meal provided by BMA House was using some of their own products from their own kitchen garden. And it was a plant-based meal, and everyone was just raving about it, absolutely raving about it. And it was just a really exciting way to show people what a different type of menu can look like, as opposed to your traditional sort of 2 meat options or whatever it is menu. It was just, people were going back for seconds and thirds. It was just great.
Well, I've got a reference point to this as well, just as to back this up. And you're right to say that we've got a unique opportunity in the events industry where we're in control of that stuff. And I went to a friend's wedding last year, and he and the bride are vegan. And so it was a vegan menu. And that's the first time I've been in an environment where that there was no option. That's it. But it was also a great opportunity, like you said, to showcase how creative that cuisine can be, and the food was delicious. I say that absolutely genuinely. They had a vegan pizza oven then in the evening, park up outside a food truck. It really was good, and like you said, it is a great point to make that we are in control of so many factors at an event, that it is a good, if we do it right, it's a great opportunity to give people a new way of thinking, or at least some other ideas that they may not of their own volition go off and explore.
And that's something, it's hard to measure, which is difficult, because we do all these things and it's very hard to measure the legacy of something like that. Like, you can't ask every attendee, well, how many vegan meals did you cook within the month after the event? It's hard to measure, but it's those type of things that you can see the change. And when you speak to people, you can see the change. And within the industry, there's been a shift towards sustainability in the last couple of years, and we want that to kind of stick around. We don't want it to just be the latest buzzword and then something else comes along. So it's about creating that change and giving people the opportunity to learn a little bit at the events that perhaps they can integrate into their everyday life.
Yeah, and if we go back to the title of the white paper, Events as a Force for Good, when you consider that there is not a business sector or a consumer sector in the world that doesn't have a trade show or an event relevant to it. If we look at B2B events, specifically, whether it's plumbing, care home management, medicine, science, every single business sector you could possibly think of has got not just one, but many events that people who work in that sector can go for. So as an industry, as an events industry, we've actually got the ability to take on and adopt processes that actually by osmosis would filter down through virtually every business sector. That's before we touch consumer events. So it really is an opportunity to sort of drive change, not just in our own industry, but in all sectors.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And an example of that is something that we are working on. One of our partners, Just One Tree, they are a reforestation and tree planting organisation, and kind of the sell is that for £1 you can plant at least one tree. And so they work in places that are close to the equator, so they have a lot more impact than, for example, planting a tree in West London. And it means that they can also do it cheaper. They create jobs for local communities in areas that are traditionally poorer areas. But the kind of pull that we have there is that there are so many tickets sold to events every year, and there are so many events that happen. If everybody added £1 to their ticket price for the events, if every event ticket price had £1 added, or £1 per delegate added to the budget, we could plant millions of trees, and that could make such a positive impact. And when you are planning events and you're looking at a budget, £1 is nothing. £1 means nothing in the grand scheme of your budget. Even £1 an attendee often means nothing in the grand scheme of the budget. And so little changes like that, doesn't take long, it's easy to do. You can have such a big impact, and you can tell all your attendees, we've planted a tree for you and it's doing great, and you can shout about it and you can use it as marketing. And if you're at a 1,000 person event, that's only cost you £1,000 of your budget to be able to do that. You would spend more on marketing anyway. So if you can use things like that, actually you're using them for marketing purpose and you're using them for a return on investment, but you're actually doing some good with that money as well. And that's just kind of one example on how as an industry we can start a trend to make things a force for good there.
Emily, just to pick up on that point, something you said earlier about data, the scientist in you, going back to seeing the evidence and seeing the data. When we talk about that as an example, for example, the tree planting, an extra bit of budget, and it goes to, right, we're going to plant 1,000 trees, one for each of the attendees.
Yeah.
How difficult is it at the moment to actually trace and track and see that was done? I'm not saying that there are organisers out there who don't do it, but they may hand their money over to a company who goes and plants trees, and they say, "Yeah, we've done that for you."
Well, that was my exact question when I got to know Just One Tree, and when I got to know Amanda, who's the founder of Just One Tree. That was my exact question to her, because I said, you know, as a geographer, I have studied examples where this is just a ploy and, you know, all of the trees die. And it's exactly as you say. But she's incredible, and the communities that they work with are incredible. They have got lots of photos of where they have got all of the tree nurseries and the communities that are involved, really empowering local communities to be taking ownership of that forestry work. And there's lots of photo evidence for how it's growing, how it's developing. We've got all of the like GIS type satellite imagery to see how that is changing, and that will obviously need time. You know, trees take a really long time to grow, but ultimately we've Just One Tree and has been able to share with us the impact that they are already having environmentally, economically, socially, in the communities where they are operating. So this is a partner that we have been just thrilled to collaborate with, thrilled to recommend, and definitely one that is really taking responsibility for tracking and then proving the work that they are doing. Because as you say, you know, you need to have the data. You can't just make a claim and then accept and hope that people will just believe you. You need to be able to have the evidence to back up what you're doing. And we really, truly believe that Just One Tree as a partner do have that evidence and are a great organization to partner with for this.
And I think it's the same, whoever you're working with in the industry, if you're looking for sustainability credentials, it's very, very easy for people to say, yeah, we're a green company, you know, we use recycled paper in the office, great. But actually doing a little bit of digging, and if somebody really does stand behind what they're saying, they shouldn't have any problems in sending you their sustainability policy, or sending you examples, or sending you their values. And just feel like people feel worried to ask the questions and push for information, and, you know, feels a bit awkward to say, well, are you actually recycling this, or are you actually doing this? But that is what we need to start. That costs us nothing. That's not a budget line item by asking for someone's sustainability policy. Because if they have 10 people asking for it in a month and they don't have one, they're going to start thinking, oh, actually, you know, this is becoming more and more popular. We should probably get on this bandwagon and start doing sustainability a bit more. And you start that change just by asking, oh, do you know where this comes from? Or how far have your crew traveled? And actually starting those conversations is really powerful as well.
I'm just going to pick up on something there, and you'll notice I was very quick on the mute button, everybody, when the front doorbell went and the dog started to bark. But you use the term bandwagon, and I'm not to critique, but is it important that we try and promote a message that it's not just a bandwagon? It's not just, oh, let's hop on that because it will look good for us an event. This is about getting people to buy into it fully rather than just seeing it as a bandwagon.
It is. It definitely is. And we know between us that we need to do more than just, you know, a trend. But we do have clients. I have, as a sustainability consultancy, one client, and the founder openly says, I do not believe in climate change. It's a scam. This isn't real. However, this looks great for my marketing, so let's spend money and do it. And for me, it's like, okay, you're still making changes and you're still doing something positive towards climate change. Whether or not your founder believes it's true or not, we're still making those changes, which is better than doing nothing. And if people are doing it for a marketing plan, if people are doing it for PR, it's not the best reason behind doing it, but at least they are still doing something, which is way better than doing nothing.
What a great response, actually, because every time I've asked that question before, people said, oh no, it's about buying. But you are right. You know, any form of change in the right direction is positive change, isn't it?
Yeah.
Excellent. We are already over time today, but I always know with two guests it's going to be difficult to cram in the entire conversation. But before we wrap up, we need to sort of fire out some links, some points of reference where people can go. It's really important while we've got you both on the podcast today that we try and direct people who are tuning into this in the right direction and give them some things to go at. So Emily, let's come to you first of all. Anything that you want to throw out there now? Links, social media, anything like that?
Yeah. Well, we would love to connect on LinkedIn, emc3, and with myself on LinkedIn. emc3's got a wonderful website with loads of our case studies and things like that. And that's where you'll also find the white paper. So I'll make sure that all those links are there. And then if anyone needs anything, please get in touch. That would be great.
Yeah. And Saskya, same to you. Anything that you want to throw out there? Websites, links?
So From Now is from-now.com. So you can find information about us on the website. But I think my one here is go and check out Just One Tree. Go and just Google Just One Tree. Go on their website, see what they do. Make a donation of £1, and that's all. That's all. If everybody who's listening does that, we can start a real change. And that to me is more important than going on the From Now website. So if you're going to do one, go to Just One Tree and have a look at what they do and watch some of their videos.
There we go. Google was Just One Tree. Let's just recap to the two websites as well. From-now.com for From Now, and Saskya and emc3.com, a really easy one. And as I said earlier on in this episode, if you Google Reimagine Sustainability, if you Google the white paper, you'll find all those resources via both of those websites. I should probably as well, it would be foolish of me not to mention the fact that as part of the production team for Event Tech Live, the team behind that, we've also launched Event Sustainability Live that launches in London at Excel. That will run on the 15th and 16th of November alongside Event Tech Live, a brand new show called Event Sustainability Live, where conversations like this are going to form all of the content for the conference stages and the content stages that will be at that particular event, as well as exhibitors and stakeholders who are involved in event sustainability. So I've no doubt that if your ears are pricked up and you've tuned into this conversation today, it would be foolish of me not to say to you, check out Event Sustainability Live, which will take place at Excel later on this year. Thank you to both of our guests today for joining us. Emily Maule, the content and event strategist from emc3, and Saskya Liney, head of sustainability at From Now. A pleasure to talk to you both. Thanks for taking a bit of a dive into that white paper. And the final thing to say today would be to just urge people to go and tap into some of the resources that we've spoken about on the podcast today. Start with the white paper, go to Just One Tree, check out some of those websites that we're given, and continue this conversation and research in your own time. And join us later on in the year, where hopefully both of you, I don't know if you're going to be there, but it'd be great to see you there. Yeah. It's certainly tied into what we're speaking about today. Don't forget that if you want to listen to audio versions of the podcast, so you're watching this on the website already, go to wherever you get your podcasts from, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, just search for the Event Industry News Podcast, and you can get audio versions of all of our podcasts. Of course, you may be listening to us already today on one of those platforms, and you can go in the opposite direction. You can see video versions of all of the podcasts on eventindustrynews.com, as well as accessing all of the news supplements, special features, the A to Z supplier directory, all of that other good stuff that's on the Event Industry News website at the same time. Which brings us neatly and nicely to the end of today's episode. Thanks again to both of my guests today. My name is James Dickson. We'll see you on the next episode of the podcast. Thanks very much to you both. Cheers.
Thank you so much.